Rita and I worked together at Kengo Kuma many years ago. I will not say how many to age both of us, but we were quite young. Rita she's worked with me both in when we worked at Kengo Kuma together, but she's also been a real help in my previous work when I was working in China. She has a real passion for especially sort of guiding young architects in faraway places. So when she was speaking and when she was teaching Chinese students at the University of Nottingham, not just Chinese students, but international students in general, it was really wonderful to see someone that is successful in a foreigner in a foreign land. In her case, as Parisa said, a Portuguese woman working in Japan. And I think it's really inspirational, aside from the work that Kengo Kuma does as a professional practice, but also just to see how that company nurtures international talent and how they give the opportunity for, as I say, foreigners in foreign lands to rise among the ranks and finally reach the partnership role where she has real opportunity to mold and guide the way that the practice works. I'm sure all of you are much more interested in listening to Rita talk about one of the great architects of the 21st century. So I'll leave that to her, and all I would like to say is arigato, Rita. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Those are, thank you to you both. Those are very kind words. It's very, it's been an honor, like, to be able to also, have a talk today. And of course, at the end of the talk will be great, to, answer to any questions. I think today the talk has a flavor of also what is happen. Sometimes some stories that they normally don't appear on the magazines, or some backstories. And yes, some of some ideas are what is actually the practice of architecture, and how are we also connected in the world. So today I'm presenting 5 projects that somehow they're all individual, or each of them has their own story. But at some point, I think is also very interesting. Everything we do somehow as a continuous or always a connection. So we always go to the past and looking into the future, and vice versa. And also to start, also I find in a kind of teasing way, it's very interesting to see how how the practice of architecture also changed quite a lot on not so many years. So I really like this image of an architecture office, before AutoCAD, where we had these like big tables and almost a very physical labor of people designing and time consuming to produce one project. And where we're going, these days, this is more a typical image of an architecture office these days. Well, this is still Japanese, so it's a bit more tight. But there is this idea, we are, sitting on a desk, looking at a screen, come with these ideas, and of course things are much faster. But also very interesting that a lot of our research these days is actually coming, from these same windows, like we put the keywords, and they, and many times, we also saw in other office, the same reference image would be used. And of course, today we are also been playing with AI generated image, which also like somehow we have a specific request, and then very immediately there is like a finalized image. And so it's like, where are we going in terms of design? So I do also find this very interesting to look into past projects. And I think a lot of what we do in architecture has to do with storytelling, how we come with the design and how we connect with the sites and the people that are part of the project. So this first project is actually it was a project to do an extension for a school in Reggio Emilia. And the school has this very interesting approach that they believe the kids, or when we grow up, we are not empty vessels that we need to feed in information, but rather we are full of information and creativity. And the school motto is how to give them tools to express And so that was like very, very striking for us, you know. And so the school is located on this garden, and this is actually a building from the 60s, but it's surrounded on this forest, you know. So while the building is very rational, very organized, very symmetrical, then there is this forest where the kids would be all playing, and they will be also hiding and seek between the trees and the fences. So there was like this very interesting energy on the building. And then the program was, okay, we need to add, you know, the building didn't have enough space, so we needed to add a new program. And we very strategically were trying to study like two totally different options. One by adding volumes, or another by actually creating a totally new building. And one of our, you know, when we come to the meetings and try to brainstorm, actually with Kuma-san, his first sketch was this kind of flow. It's like I want to, you know, and there is a name in Japanese that is fudegaki. And so that's this energy of brush paint, you know, through a paper, a continuous brush paint without taking out the brush from the paper. And so it's almost like trying to capture that the building would be like how to capture the energy of the kids on these grounds. And so once we came into, you know, this disruptive idea, or this became the storyline, and then we allowed ourselves to explore in different ways. And so we went into model making, you know, went very manual again, you know, trying to explore like how to create this energy, you know, what would be the bubbles or the spaces, you know, how, you know, architecture could bring and open or hide, you know, the same playful way. And so eventually, our plot became the idea of like creating this movement, you know, that sometimes, you know, is more intense, other times more tight, within this primitive or like this kind of protective area. And so that became the project itself, you know, this idea of a continuous building that sometimes is boundary, sometimes touch the building, sometimes is a playground, where, you know, the size of it increases and decreases, goes up and down. And so trying to have the maximum relationship with the surrounding nature, and the idea of like trying to bridge the architecture with the surroundings, and giving the maximum sensory emotions for the users. And then finally, because this model was going to be presented to the kids on the kindergarten, and they also have a say in the building, we also wanted the model to don't have like the typical way. So we made it almost like a kind of a pictures book drawing, and we were like playing with this idea of the model, and so we could also bridge their communication, and so they would be more comfortable to give us feedback. Then actually this project I put it today, but I thought was like in this continuation of where is the sites and how we can approach. And so sometimes when we are presented with a challenge, we need to step back for a wider picture. This project is in Singapore. It was a competition. We started in 2019 actually, and we got the project in 2020. And then the challenge, or let's say the brief, was we needed to create a memorial for the founders of Singapore. And the site is like the garden opposite of Gardens of the Bay. There is this new garden that they are producing. And when we realized the building itself was quite small, and we were afraid like how, you know, the building would get lost in the sites. You know, how we could actually make this memorial something, you know, that, you know, becomes like, or a kind of a scale wise. So our strategy, you know, rather than, you know, again, was like how to blend the building, or actually the idea became a bit the opposite. The building becomes the garden, and so the entire garden is becomes the building. And so once we enter, or so then the whole idea of the project becomes, we start with the path as soon as we arrive to the garden, and then that path also gets the same transitions and mutations, opens and creates this almost like coming from, emerging from the grounds and creating the spaces of the architecture. And so this would be, for instance, the arrival. So our idea was once we step into the garden, to the entire site, we already know that we are in the memorial. So the building itself, or the architecture, is not only the physical program, but again, the entire extension. And so with that and the idea of the path and the journey, we've been able like to kind of create different scenarios, or different perspectives again through the garden, and creating this experience that will guide you into the building. And the building itself becomes also this almost cave-like experience, again coming from the grounds, or a coziness, a space that eventually will guide the visitors into the top. And so people could look back to Singapore, again looking into the past, projecting for the future of the new Singapore. So also we find that by doing this and having the garden, we this was something, it came as a result of the initial strategy. Then the building gained multiple entrance, so we didn't have only one entrance for the building. We could have multiple entrance that also allowed us to go to create different environments or different events for the building at different moments. So here you could see like how has all the floors connected, and then there is one big basement that actually kind of connects the entire building. And then here, so once we would come through the path, and then there is again this idea of the building that emerged from the grounds, also the materiality, and that's now we are also exploring with the local manufacturers. We wanted also the building feel like there was like a ripple, or like coming from the grounds, and have like this idea of earth materiality that is represented into the facades, and also like breaking down the idea of like a solid facade, but rather something that is growing. So here you could see this is the other building. So there is like two buildings that they go through a path and create this journey for different activities. And then again, this space also can be used during the night for events and gatherings. And so the idea of like all Singaporeans coming into one place to celebrate the memory of their founders. So going with a couple of projects going on, but par with our projects and the idea of these competitions and design, a lot of our research also has to do with materiality. And so most of our projects always have this exploration with materiality, and most of the time we also learn with craftsmen. And so, for instance, Japan is a is very strong in terms of woodwork and the carpentry. And so a big part of our projects are also highlight wood research, not only, but is one part of our research. And it's very interesting because we look into the knowledge that exists, especially the joineries, and from that we kind of explore different scales of that. So again, the projects are a continuous succession of experiments. So we started many times we do it from a pavilion, and then from a pavilion once we dominate more of the structure or how the system works, we try what can we explore this and go it farther. And so we go into, then we explore this building in the center, it's GC Museum. We actually use that unity of the shidori into the entire facade of the building. And then later, we then even developed a three-dimensional joints. So from while we learn with the craftsmanship and we did also building through these buildings, then in a later stage, we actually developed 3D joints together with carpenters and also with engineers. We've been able to push farther the idea, or like the original idea of the craftsmanship. And then on this pushing farther, then it goes sometimes also pushing into other materials. And so this project was also a pavilion. We've been challenged to do a stone pavilion in Milano Salone. We do a couple of pavilions almost every year, and we try to explore the materiality to its limits. And then for this case, our premise became, can we explore stone almost as more like in the wood quality? And so our first, experiments was like, okay, we're doing some joinery and connections. Then we were trying to study how the system grows. We are doing like almost this branch, spiral growth. And then it was also very interesting because in this case, the stones were laser cut. So there was a precision of 2 millimeters in between all these joint connections. So this was in Carrara marble, very heavy. And so we were trying to see how this system could work and be, supportive and actually not be dangerous. And then we went for the first tests, and the first tests actually were not very promising. When we trying to put the stone connection and then with a metal pin, it immediately broke, because again, stone works very well to compression, but it's not flexible as wood. And so actually we were like, once we did the first test, like of a hard element of stone with a hard pin element, this hardness with hardness immediately broke. And then, but with this, actually, our engineer found a solution that then the way to actually approach this was actually to bring some soft elements. And so as contrasts, while sometimes, wood is used to break stone, in this case, actually wood would bring some softness, and then when the stone would have some small movements in between them, actually the wood doll, they will be able to absorb those movements and actually would be able to give resistance to the stone. And so with that idea, so we've been able actually to bring to Milano. So this was also, how the stones and how these elements were brought to the site. So almost these kind of units coming in a box. We also had our model that we also brought to the site because we were working with the craftsmen of the stone company that they have never experiment. So we were side by side building the model and they building the stone pavilion. And of course, once we go to sites on this, these exhibitions, like we thought that the site actually was very flat. For this structure, we needed the surface to be as flat as possible. So we were on site working with engineers in Japan, sending message, working with the carpenters, trying to find a solution to give the maximum stability to the pavilion. And then eventually we've been able to start doing the installation. Again, at the same time, we were doing the models and we're using the model as a base or a guidance. And then this was the final result. So the idea, again, so this became quite successful, the idea of like a stone that is very heavy, suddenly have or borrow the lightness of, or the idea, the illusion of wood, and create these kind of three-dimensional fields that bringing these steps and light and shadow. And with that, we actually been able to create the space. So in this process of of doing pavilions or competitions, eventually we go into the bring me to this other project. This is a project that we did in Portugal. Was a competition as well, and is currently in construction. And it's very this project has been very challenged, and that's because that's one of the reasons why I call it the process and the editing. We won the competition in 2018, and the project was on hold for a couple of time, and then it restarted in 2020. The project or the site itself, again, this is like a very urban context, but it's actually in a sprawl of Porto, and the city center kept developing, and this building was there from the 1930s. So it's a slaughterhouse that in between in the 90s was deactivated, and when they were built, it was quite far away because slaughterhouses need to be really far away from the city because of the smells, noise. Also needs to be near a water area. And then but at the end of its life, when it was deactivated, the city had grown so much that it became like kind of forgotten in between of the urban fabric. And it was kind of so the program was to revitalize this project and bring in creative industries, a museum, a cultural or community center into this space, and a new bridge. One of the biggest challenge we got it is while there is no organization of the territory, and then we also have like big infrastructures like the FC Porto Stadium. There is a speedway that was built, and by the way, this belt has been one of the reasons why the city has been growing very disorganized after the speedway. And then you would have like the sprawl of houses. And so one of our after a couple of interactions within the team, our kind of design, and then we use a similar image, but the idea was almost to create in a kind way we would call a battle of giants. We're trying to establish a dialogue, what is the stadium and the big infrastructure elements. We created this roof that would cover partially the existing buildings, and and create like a suddenly scale, because also like they are the level of also of the existing building is lower than the highway. And so the idea was to create this kind of roof that could be seen from the stadium, could be seen from the speedway. But once we would come inside, and when the people would be walking through these spaces, it would filter the light and create a protection, let's say, of shadow, and also a continuation to the existing buildings. This is one of the existing buildings. They're also very high scale, and they would be renovated. And then, of course, some areas of open. And then COVID happened, and then we had a lot of budget constraints, and in that sense was kind of actually was asked to us to reduce 70% of the roof, which was almost impossible at the time. If we were doing that, we would have almost no roof. So we had to rethink the project, and we have to restructure what is the materiality of this roof and what is the backbone. So this has definitely been a really big editing, or we'd face the choice of not having the project, or how can we dialogue and how can we together again with engineers, with the client, with the consultants, how can we actually bring this idea we want, still this scale dialogue, and also bringing this kind of shadow or creating plazas of protection into the building. And so we changed the materiality of the project. We still have the roof, but we created, we went through, and then this is where also like our teams and computational design goes into the design of the roof, try to rethink all the way how this panelization can be done and optimized. So I'm just showing you some of what's in the parametric design, how we can get our initial idea to the new requirements. And so we could have done this without the technology, actually, or we would take us like much longer time. And so through this several process of interaction and the trials and errors, we've been able to optimize the roof design, scale it down, and then create the environment that we were still trying to create. Again, this is the arrival plaza. So we wanted to have like this space of shadow, especially to protect from the summers. And then this is also like on the opposite side where we have the bridge and the arrival, again, creating these moments of embracing or arrival, and creating all these also public spaces. And here just a bit of what has been going on process. And I think I'm actually no, I think I still want time. But so it's just showing what was the process and the scale of the project. And then finally, I'm bringing you to the last project. And I think we're saying looking for the right question. And in a way, like all the projects we're looking into is like, every project has a challenge, and every brief is a problem to solve. And so looking to the right question actually can lead you to the right answer. And not saying that each project can only have one answer, but it's again how we connect or how we build the storyline for the project. So this one is a project we is also a competition we won in 2019, and is actually going to open this year. So this is a Lisbon Foundation. They have two museums, let's say. So this is Gulbenkian Foundation, and it's kind of very unique foundation, and they are like a retreat in the center of Lisbon. They have this garden where everybody from the city on the weekends will come and gather. While this is a private foundation, they are very open to society and very connected to their neighbors, and so they very in a very way, like they open always the garden and their doors to the people. And they've been very fundamental, very essential foundation in Portugal for their culture and how they're embracing artists. So the garden is a very key part, let's say it's the heart of this foundation. And then the brief was like, they have another museum that's of modern art, and before the access to the museum was through the main building. But recently they acquired a new piece of garden, and then with this new piece of garden, they wanted to create a new entrance, a new exhibition space, and reinforce the access between between the two museums. So we went through quite a length of extent, like in this case, to find the solution. I must say we went through different options and different designs, and then finally, again, the same way our guiding line became, we don't want that the architecture reduces the garden, because we needed to do this new gallery, right, and the new entrance. We want to actually give more space to the garden. And so then our strategy became, can we look to the building and we see what is superfluous, and also see like if we can create a new space to admire the garden. And so the entire strategy was, okay, we can only build where there is no garden, which was this back side. So this red slit you see was like the back side of the museum. And then we removed some of the elements that they were, let's say, they were closing or creating barriers on the building. So the entire strategy became trying to remove to create architecture. And so we kind of removed some elements, we opened the building, trying to reinforce connections, and we created like a roof, like we call it like an engawa, and a gesture that connects between the garden and the museum. So this became the movement of approach. So this would be the very welcome roof that through the garden people would see this entrance, and then once they would come near the roof again as a part of discovery, then you could enter under this roof and appreciate a panoramic view of the garden. And so this became our gesture in a way of like again how to give more space to the garden. So here you could see how we've been able to do this strategy. So this was the section at the competition time. It's been in between updated. But then, so our strategy became, again, we buried the gallery space. So the entire new gallery will be under the Engawa. And then we have the Engawa that makes the connections between the garden and the museum, creating these new facades. But we also open the connection between the gallery and the garden. And we always try to bring all these new spaces that we brought to bring light into the spaces of the gallery. And then we do this, not just again because we want to remove, but also because we are influenced by the existing museum. So if you see to the opposite side, the existing museum already had this connection always to the garden. And so inspired by the existing, then we brought it back into the new spaces. And here you could see how this openness, again, so before this image, you would see the administration building was here. So we've been able to remove the office, they're outdated, and we've been able to fit within the museum in other areas. But by doing this, we've been able to open the museum, create access of connection between the two gardens. And here is a lower gallery, the new gallery that we opened. Where was supposed to be the back of the museum now is the new entrance. And so again, the visitors also enjoy that experience through the Engawa into the garden. And in that sense, we also brought the materiality of the Engawa into the new space. So we've been very careful, like while dealing the dialogue between the existing and the new. So we want to respect as maximum the original architecture design, but when we had some alteration on the spaces, then we tried to bring some softness into the spaces, highlighting with the materiality. So in this case, we brought the woods that we also have in Dengawa, and we also have on the main building of the foundation. And here you can see, so again, this is a continuity from outside to inside and vice versa. And again, this idea of blending the boundaries. Here you can see how the Engawa, flips back into the building and creates the moment of entrance. And again, so a sequence of the project, and how suddenly the main lobby becomes the bridge again in between the two gardens. And in terms of circulation, so we try to improve. So our circulation became again the idea: what can we remove, where we can. So we don't want to. It's kind of the opposite process of designing architecture. We are trying to remove spaces. So we inside we created this cross circulation that takes you into the basement and into the new gallery, let's say, and then you would come back to the original gallery in a kind of a circular system. So again, this is the area where we actually made an intervention. So we created this lobby. This is going to be the shop area. And so again, the area where we did the intervention, we add a new materiality. Because the building has this very almost infrastructural, very brutalist kind of texture and concrete, then in this industrial dialogue we brought mesh into the walls, but while industrial material, it's lighter than the concrete, so to give this kind of lightness into the spaces. Here you can see, so we open, this existed in the building, so we just open the voids to accentuate and celebrate again the structure of the building. And then is this when we were coming down into access into the new gallery. And here you can see, so like how the basement plan would go. So we would come, and then the entire new gallery that is below the Engawa, we accentuated, and then the access circulation. So here you can see the space, and we do have a skylight that's optional. Sometimes they will need to close, but the idea of, again, bringing the light into the space. More detailed, how the section works. And then after this experience of the gallery, we create this tension moment where visitors are guided into, again, the main spaces and received by the garden. So this is the existing gallery, where we just, created a wider void into the garden. There was already some existing. And here you can see the idea of arrival of sorry, actually the images are going fast. So, and this would be the main entrance. So we brought the idea, through the garden and the discovery would have like this central lake and this Engawa, that's from the top, the materiality of it. And this was also very important for since the competition. We brought ceramic tiles into the garden. And so this was inspired by the typical Portuguese gardens, that they always have a fountain with tiles. And so inspired by this material that is widely used in Portugal, we wanted to bring this material into the roof of the Engawa and create this welcoming experience, and also bring the water element into, again, this idea of garden. So then when we come here, we almost don't feel the architecture idea is like, again, these guys into the garden. Here you can see some of our ongoing. So this was a very interesting, so this was our first mock-up, where we would have the tiling system. We were working with local suppliers. The tiles are actually being glazed with a very historical glazing company, or of very old heritage for craftsmanship. But then the technology, how it's applied, we've been all using computational design, and to actually have all the tolerances correct. So it's, again, merging in between two worlds. And here you can already see, this is some photos of the progress on site. Again, how we actually been removing, and we open the space. And then the ongoing process. So you can already see the tiling. If you can see in the pictures, you also can see the tiling as like 2 to 3 different colors. I must say this was also slightly inspired, or we're trying to have lesson learned from Opera Sydney, where the tiling has also different colors, and for us it was very interesting, the same idea of when the weather changes, the color or the presence of the Engawa also changes. And here you can see how we've been working, or the roof folding almost, and then the structural design. So we also have an amazing team of engineering, Burro Happel and Quadrant, that aligned with us, because we wanted to create this the illusion of a very light structure. And then this is like, again, site construction. We won't have water, but happened to be in a day that rained and it was on the process. But then you can see how the materiality of the Engawa is getting its aspects and playing with the lightness of the pillars. And here, like a detail, again, how we bring in this materiality into the public space, and slightly bit more of the lake. So, just to, I think this is actually it's one of the texts that I enjoy, and I think has a lot to do with what we do in the office and, how we get inspiration. So we, in a way, are all connected, not only with the site, again, with the people we work with, the teams that come behind of the project, and all the storyline of a project, it's a continuous transformation and adaptation. So I think that's why also it's so exciting, the way how we as a profession can, take the tools that are surrounding us or the inspiration from the people we meet on the way, to do, to bring it back to the project. So I think this is also like, a good question that can be applied to everyone, what you want your story to do or tell, and, and we are all part of that story. And, this is just some ongoing pictures, how we go on the sites. These days, a lot of our communication is also like this in Zooms. And, but anytime we have chance, we try to do like or experiment with models, even in a very rudimentary way. Well, thank you for your time. I think I went a bit over, but
thank you very much, Rita. It was really inspiring. I really enjoyed the intricacies of your designs, and especially the fact that it usually embraced very much the nature and how it connects, with nature, and also it was always filled with natural light. So it was really fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and your experiences with us. I would like to open it to the participants. Does anyone have any question for Rita? I have. You can either type or feel free to turn on your mic if you like. Justin.
Sorry, or maybe I'll stop sharing.
Rita, did you mention that your camera doesn't work? Because it would be nice for people to see you.
Yes, correct. I did have some technology situation today.
No, that's all right. All good. Justin, you might want to turn on your mic and camera as you're comfortable.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I won't turn on my camera, and I'll save you from that horrible image. But thank you, Rita. That was so cool. I really enjoyed that. I especially enjoyed the connection between this act of drawing in the school work in that building. But the thing I was really fascinated by was the choice of materials with the marble piece for the in Milan, because I remember seeing the bamboo ring at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London a while ago, and that mixture of carbon fiber and bamboo, which was just so elegant, but it was also the sense of that as a sort of almost, I don't know, to me it seemed almost like, I know it's an experiment in sort of concepts of weaving, but that connection between that sort of hand action of drawing and the materiality to me was really fascinating. I was wondering if you could say some more about that, perhaps.
Yeah, we find I think again it's very interesting, because also like when I was putting this presentation together, actually again we were talking in the office, and we always sharing our experience, and indeed a part of it actually is we tendency today we are very working on computer, for instance, or or less and less office are doing models, but we do find that this need of going through different mediums, or sketching or models, or sometimes other people will use photography or etc., that gives you a mental flexibility to come with new ideas or solutions. So it's more like we have an idea about how can we express it and how it can be represented. Many times we're trying to do something that was not explored yet or done yet. So definitely, again, the sketching and the model making, they help us a lot. Sometimes to see from a different perspective. Other times even to communicate with other people. So especially if we are in a very, for instance, we work in a very multicultural environment with all different backgrounds. Words are not always have the same meaning.
Mm.
So I think sketching, again, all those elements are they're great tools that we should not forget to use.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Thanks, Justin. Does anyone else have any question? Camilla, do you want to type or do you want to turn on your mic?
Hello.
Fantastic.
Let's see if the microphone works. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
All right. First of all, as well, everybody's saying it. Thank you so much. It's really good to see these projects, understand a little bit of the process. And that's what I want to go and ask a little bit more about is in the process, specifically two aspects that I'm interested in is computational design, parametric design that you mentioned that you used in a few of the projects, is how does it fit in the design stage? Where, in what point do you bring those type of skills and type of design process into the entire timeline of that? That was the first question. And the second one is, in the same line of new technologies, do you integrate any VR, AR technology that is becoming more and more common nowadays? So again, thinking in the design process, how did you integrate these tools in the timeline?
Thank you, Camila. It's nice to see you.
Yeah.
It's been it's very interesting discussion because sometimes, especially with the new tools, we got really excited, right? And because very easily they can do like a very interesting shape, and it looks something new. And so, but a lot of the discussion has to do again with the question, like, so I feel like once you have a really backbone or the concept of a project well stabilized, then you can develop from that. You can play around. And so I feel always the challenge with us, and again, I don't think there is one way to use the tools or technology, but it's always it's been sorry, I kind of lost my current of thought. No, but the challenge is like when when to bring, are we just like to again, we're just trying to do it because it looks cool. But so okay, I got it back. It's actually, it should be used as a tool. So I think there's like, and not that tool be used by us. Like we should take advantage of it as a tool, as the maximum capacity. So actually, I just briefly, I can tell a small story. We are working or trying to do also with 3D printing houses. Okay. And we just saw, in Barcelona, so they're doing amazing studies, and they actually were working with earth design, and then and because the earth stability is not, let's say, or it takes more time to dry than concrete, they actually needed to create a lot of holes in the walls. And for that, then they used the computational design to understand what will be the most efficient mesh or net that actually then create like a parametric design for the ventilated facades. And so then so I think it was a great way of like how technology became like a tool to help you with your initial problem. So I think that it should come more into this rather than the technology is the beginning of the conversation, or if that makes sense to you.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah. And then VR is, it's been it going, it's a process. I think it's still not being so effective. Many times where we do a 360 render, and so in some places you will have like a person with a phone and work. But it's been, for instance, very useful or very interesting in construction sites. where you have your contractors with like a cell phone, and then they overlay the BIM model or the structure with the existing site with the GPS coordination. So that actually, I'm very excited to see more of that happening. That kind of maybe technological revolution coming more into the construction sites, and I think that will be very, very interesting.
Yes, that's something that I was going to mention, is to continue the conversation at that point. The Milano Pavilion, I think it was the one that you had the small model that you sort of started building alongside the actual model. That's when I started to think of one of the uses for AR and VR, that you could have it digitally and not only have it in one scale on the table, but you can even move it to the actual site and see how it's actually built together. And so that's sort of where my brain is started to connect some ideas and a combination of new technologies. Do you think that would be possible, or something that you guys plan?
I think that's a great point, and again, I think eventually, I think there'll be some people in the industry that are going to take that, and I think there are already some stepping stones for that. But I think will be, they'll definitely be embracing.
Nice, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Camilo. Thank you, Rita. We might have time for one last question if anyone else would like to ask any question. Okay, Xavier, please go ahead.
Hello, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. I just wanted to ask, a lot of the projects that you worked on seem to incorporate existing infrastructure or sort of large scale existing like natural sites. I was just curious how you balance learning about the site and gaining that site context, and then creating somewhat minimal impact on these sites. I thought it was really interesting how you spoke about gearing your presentation towards the children for the school project, obviously, as they're the ones who will live in and like experience that space. But yeah, how do you go about sort of making minimal impact on these natural sites, but also gaining the most from your site research?
It's a very complex question.
Sorry.
No. Of course, no. Please. It's definitely a process. Let me say, like, for our, in our office, this has been always a very important premise that people working on the project should visit the sites, because even all the technology we have right now is still the feeling of the space, the context, and etc. They're really essential parts, like how to understand the project. Even if sometimes it happens, you might do a competition without going to the site. It's not common, but then, at the first moment, at the beginning of the project, that definitely needs to happen. And yes, so the different site will tell you like different, will give you different cues. So that's one of the, I think it's one of the premise that we do. For instance, for the Gulbenkian project, that was the existing museum, we thought, the existing museum had a really interesting character, and the architect was Leslie Martin. Would say it's the building is like a hangar, but somehow we thought that we could even explore more and celebrate more of the structure of the building. And so we thought this could be a way to, we found this could be a good solution. So again, they are very catered for each project, right? And somehow, maybe tying up with your other question of, when we did the model for the kids, I think is also like when you're doing a presentation in architecture or, in any situation, also like, I think it's kind of important to know your audience, so how you actually can do the best communication possible, creating that bridge. And so for us, it was like, again, so depending on the project, and this I can say, so depending on the, who you are presenting to, our models will also be different. So because it's also a way of communicating.
Thank you, Rita. I think Lucas's hands is up. I don't know, Lucas, can you turn on your mic, please, and just maybe quickly ask your questions? 1 minute left.
Sure. Sorry, can you hear me clearly? If not, I
Yes.
can. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Rita. Yeah. So I'm just asking a question based off of like the context from the perspective of like an architecture student. How does Kengo Kuma like approach iconic architecture, particularly the in the context of the Singapore Memorial, whilst also considering sort of sustainable and net zero like principles?
That's a kind of it's a great challenge. Obviously, like as we're moving forward in the process, of this designing architecture, and we know that actually the biggest impact you have in the building is at the beginning as a construction, when all the materials comes to the site. Everything else on the building, and you can improve in terms of sustainability of air, of systems and etc. at the life of the building. But we know like a lot of the impact is on the beginning. So it's always like a kind of a hard balance, because also we can propose the architects, and then there is also costs, clients, everybody kind of involved. So sometimes, for instance, we want to use more of imagine like wooden structure, that would be like quite, in terms of initial carbon footprint, would be much reduced, but not always is possible in certain countries. And so you always have like the context, the local context, that is challenged. So we always try to do a couple of parts. But for instance, on the Singapore one in particular, for us was very interesting because it's still a considerable size building in a very challenged land. But because we have this land movement or landscape, it actually looks bigger than it is. So in that part, we found that we were a bit successful in the sense of like trying to bridge the idea of a building that needs to be quite iconic, because yes, it's a memorial for Singaporeans, but in the context of the scale of the garden, then dissipates and create like this kind of new like ecosystems surrounding the building. So it's definitely this was one of our strategies.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Rita. I really appreciate your time, Rita. We really enjoyed the talk. For those people who missed that, we have recorded the talk, and you can find the recording on our ArchiTalk website. And you can just simply access that, and perhaps you can share that with your colleagues, friends, students, or as appropriate. And there are some thank you messages for you, Rita, on the chat box. It was a great pleasure to have you here. We're hoping we can see you in person sometime soon in Western Australia.
That would be lovely. Definitely.
Great. Thank you.
No, thank you, everybody. It was, very nice. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always great to, to also hear other people's feedback and questions. So, yeah, it was very nice, and, congratulations for your projects.
No worries. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rita. I'll be in touch. Have a great day. Cheers. Bye.
You too.